So we're going to turn it over to Marc now. I'm going to have to read a little bit about Marc. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his background. Jenny already mentioned the great job he's done as a leader, as the director of admissions and recruitment. He's originally from Detroit. We won't hold that against him because he graduated from UW-Stevens Point. Actually did some coaching, as I learned this morning. He's a 2013 graduate. He recently received the Inclusive Excellence Award presented by UWSP's Alliance of Multicultural and Diversity Organizations. And that awards individuals who've made significant efforts to create a more inclusive and equitable Stevens Point community. And I know a lot of you are doing that in your businesses as well, creating that community that all people are welcome. His wife, Lisa, also UW-Stevens Point alum. I mean, you just keep racking up the points with everybody here. That's great. The values of diversity and inclusivity are very important values to the couple, and they really use their voice to bring more awareness to social justice, including being part of social media campaigns, Zoom discussions, offering a safe space to learn, engage, and resources to create change. I think what really says a lot about Marc is I just met him the first time this morning. We've emailed back and forth, but within like minutes, I felt like I've known him forever. So he's that kind of Central Wisconsin kind of person, right? He's part of our team. We're glad to have him here. So Marc, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let's please help me welcome Marc Young.
Well, good morning, and thank you all for being here today. My name is Marc Young. I serve as Director of Admissions and Recruitment for UW-Stevens Point and our campuses in Marshwood and Wausau. My pronouns are he and his. Today, I'm honored to be here for many reasons. One, I had no idea what I was going to say as I walked up here today. I'm like, man, I really think that Tanya sent the wrong person an invitation. Because I'm way too young to come up here and advise people on what to do with their business. One, because I don't have a business myself, but what I do know very well and am very good at is storytelling. And I think the best way for me to articulate any type of opportunities for change is to tell my story and how it's led me here today. So if you can hang tight with me, I hope to navigate this articulately. When I look at my journey coming from Detroit, Michigan, I want to paint you a picture on how I arrived here. Imagine growing up in a neighborhood where your walk to school included walking by broken glass and needles, walking by boarded up homes and abandoned homes that were filled by squatters and often drug dealers. And that was just a walk to school every day. Imagine walking into your neighborhood high school for registration and the secretary encouraging your mother to take your kids elsewhere because they were too well kept for that environment. Also imagine your neighborhood high school having the highest murder rate of any high school in the city of Detroit. I mean, this is the type of environment I grew up in. So for me to be standing here today, I just often kind of take a step back and kind of fathom at the experience and all the people that have helped me and propelled me to where I am today. I saw things as a child that that would shake most adults. And so just to be here today, I'm really excited. Now, I don't say those things and looking for your pity. I surely don't need it, and I surely don't want it, okay? I'm sharing that with you to paint a picture of how my perspective has been shaped based on my life experiences. I made the decision to leave Detroit very early on in my high school career. I knew I had to escape. There had to be much more to the world than what I had known growing up in Detroit, Michigan. And although I've been in Stevens Point, Wisconsin for 10 years, I have not yet adopted to the lifestyle of being a Packer fan, which is incredibly frustrating. The last 30 years have been stressful as a Lions fan, as you can imagine, and have probably watched. Please hold all jokes until the end of my presentation. Coming out of high school, I didn't have many options. I had an 18 on my ACT, a 2.6 GPA, and my opportunities were limited. I did, however, because of football, I had the opportunity to get accepted to Western Michigan University as a preferred walk-on, but that was only because of football. And preferred walk-on means that they essentially knew my name and that I was likely going to be a practice dummy for the starters. I was 130 pounds soaking wet with bricks in my pockets coming out of high school. So through mutual acquaintances, I got in touch with a guy by the name of Scott West. Many of you may know that guy, Scott. And I say this with all the love and care in the world. Scott is the whitest man that you will ever meet. Scott is now my mentor. Things that I learned from Scott have really shaped my approach to the work that I do today. Despite my interest in UWSP, after conversations with Scott, I was actually denied admission to UW Stevens Point. How ironic is that? All right, comes full circle pretty quick, doesn't it? That rejection, and luckily those folks that denied me are no longer here because I'd have some words for them. That rejection was difficult, but adversity is a common thread that I've experienced in my lifetime, so it wasn't anything that I wasn't ready or prepared to handle. So I was faced with two options. One, go to Western Michigan and go there with my friends and be comfortable. Or I could go to a community college in Cloquet, Minnesota. Anybody know where that is? All right, I see two people nodding, and that's a typical response. Cloquet, Minnesota is 15 minutes from Duluth. Cloquet, Minnesota is primarily on a Native American reservation, and the Native folks are Indian, and they speak a native tongue of Ojibwe. And so coming from Detroit, Michigan, I did not know what a culture shock was until I landed 16 hours away from home in Cloquet, Minnesota. Now, what I quickly realized is that they do not like Lions fans, okay? And so my jersey was something that I wore not very often. And it was a very small community. The only attraction on a Friday night, there were no parties. We went to this place called Wally World. Many of you know it as Walmart. That was our only attraction and fun thing to do on a Friday night. With that culture shock, my intent there was to go there and pursue football and academics, more so football though, I'm just gonna be honest. With being exposed to that native culture, I learned a lot about a different way of life, and I learned a lot about myself and how little I knew of the world coming from Detroit. I'm not sure I ever got over that culture shock being in Cloquet, Minnesota, but it holds a near and dear place in my heart, and I have many friends from that experience. Meanwhile, this guy from Wisconsin keeps messaging me. I'm like, why is this weird guy asking me, how's it going? How's my day today? Little did I know he was creating an authentic relationship with me and was really interested in me as a person and not so much just as a talent or what I could do for UW Stevens Point on the football field. And that was weird to me because many of the other recruiters that I had interacted with only saw me as a talent and how I could contribute to their success. For that reason, after my year of football at Cloquet, I rejected scholarship opportunities and transferred to UW Stevens Point. Now, throughout the entire recruitment process with Scott, he did not mention to me, and he probably did this intentionally, what winters are like in Wisconsin, okay? Now, I'm just leaving Cloquet, Minnesota, and that's a different type of cold if you've ever been up to Duluth. And then Stevens Point was very similar. I called my mom and I said, Mom, listen, the coat that you bought me is not gonna work here. I think I need to buy a coat from Wisconsin to make it through. The road to Stevens Point was a rough one because I took a 16-hour Greyhound bus from Detroit to Milwaukee and then got off in Milwaukee, caught a Lamers bus up to Stevens Point. On the way, I saw all of these names of cities that got even more weird the further north I got. So I called Mom. I said, Mom, listen, I don't know what I've gotten myself into, but is it too late to come home? And my mother said, Mark, unfortunately, you no longer have a room in my house, so you better figure it out. And I said, Mom, I left clothes back there, in the room. And she said, well, that's now my office, so you better figure it out, dude. And that was my mother's way of being tough and giving me some tough love in that moment, which I needed. When I got to Stevens Point, they dropped me off at Olympia, got off the bus smelling some good food, and there was Scott in his van ready to pick me up. My undergraduate career was nothing short of a culture shock for a few reasons. One, and bear with me here, folks, I had never seen this many white people in one place. It was like a movie. I was just dropped into a place and I was like, oh my gosh. For the first time, I was the darkest person in the room. And that was a shocker to me. And then two, the Packers fans hated Lions fans even more than Vikings fans. And so I was literally 0 for 2, just like we are this season. But I'll digress. Yeah, I see that guy, quite the laugh. My undergraduate career was full of lessons and teachable moments. I entered a team as a transfer student athlete. And if you know anything about sports, when you see a transfer walk in, you know that their intent is to not only add to the team, but potentially take somebody's job. And so I wasn't welcome right away. I also complained about the lack of diversity to my mother. And my mother stopped me at some point. She said, Mark, I'm not going to sit here and let you waste my time complaining about things that you have the opportunity to change. And that moment was when I made a decision to be involved and not let my circumstances dictate my perspective. And then being in a place where the land is also occupied by so many deer. We don't have those small horses roaming around Detroit in our neighborhoods. And then the folks are so comfortable with them. My first experience in UW-Stevens Point in the residence hall, I had a couple of my buddies from my floor. They came over and said, hey, Mark, let's go out to Schmeekley. And I said, well, what's Schmeekley? They said, it's the nature reserve on the north end of campus. And I said, the woods? And they said, yeah. And I said, no, I'm okay. Based on my experience in movies, what I see is typically black guys are first to go. Not really interested in dying. I think I have a lot more life to live. And so out of sheer convincing from my friends, they got me to go into Schmeekley, and there I was walking around. I look up, and for the first time in my life, I see a deer live and in the flesh, and it freaked me out. Okay. Not only was this small horse very close to me, but it also had horns. And so I was really stricken at that moment. I stopped and I froze out of fear. My buddies are all laughing. Mark, it's just a deer. It's not going to bother you, man. And I said, look, if you're comfortable with it, get it away from me. As immature 18 and 19-year-olds, they did exactly the opposite. They sat there and let me suffer and took video footage of it. So now when they send me a text, I won't even open it because I'm fearful of reliving that moment. As I fast forward, Scott knew that I was looking for a job and wanted to get involved in recruitment and changing the landscape at UWSP. And so he offered me a job in admissions and recruitment. And funny enough, as I sit next to my colleague, Demetrius Walker with Thriving, Demetrius and I go way back, and I say that now as a guy who has gray hair. I actually was a part of Demetrius's campus tour to UW-Stevens Point, and also had a chance to hire him and work alongside of him at UWSP. And now he's living and thriving in this community with he and his wife, Hannah. So just bringing so many things full circle for me today. There I was playing college football, thriving in a new environment, making a little bit of money, enough to buy myself a little piece of car. And as a kid that typically had nothing, that was something for me. And so I bought this beautiful 2001 two-door Pontiac Grand Prix. It was forest green. You couldn't tell me it wasn't a Bentley fresh off the lot. And like most used cars, something went immediately wrong. And so I called my dad, and we're troubleshooting. My dad told me to go and find a junkyard. Luckily, McDill's was still open and operating. And so I pull into McDill's, and I'm on the phone with my dad as he's trying to walk me through what I should be looking for. I open the door to McDill's, and sure as I open the door to McDill's, here comes a lifted pickup truck bending the corner. And the young man leans out the window, and I can see his face right now, and leans out the window and yells crystal clear, "Go back to where you came from, N-word." In that moment, I was shaken. I had a whirlwind of emotions. Some of those included fear, panic, disgust, a feeling of unwelcomeness, you name it. I was shaken to the core. And for the first time in my life, this was a moment that I experienced my dad not having an answer. Feeling vulnerable because in that moment, he could not protect his son. And as a father, I don't have kids, but as a father, I'm guessing that's what you set out to do, is protect your kids by any cost. And so my father's response was, "Mark, turn around, go back to your dorm, pack your car, and come home." That was his answer. But I said no. I was not going to allow anybody's uncomfortableness with my skin tone or anybody's unrest with their own shortfalls to dictate my future. And so as I turned and looked, the guy standing at the counter at McDill's, he had the same, it looks like, emotions that I was experiencing: fear, panic, disgust, and unwelcome. And he just apologized. Not that it was his fault, but for the instance that it happened. And so from there, I really got involved in, making UW-Stevens Point and the Stevens Point community at large a more welcoming place. And I did that through recruitment. One of the ways in which I think UW-Stevens Point and Stevens Point as a whole can do better is telling our story. We have a hidden gem here in central Wisconsin, and our old Midwestern nice, we want to be very low-key about it. And if you come and you embark on it, great, but if not, that's okay too. We're still going to get along and be along here in Stevens Point. But why not tell this wonderful story? And so I started doing that in recruitment, and I started to interact with people who look like me. I started to go down to schools in Milwaukee and Madison and even Oshkosh area and recruit others and tell them about this wonderful place, this transformed place in central Wisconsin. And it is so much power and representation. And I'm saying all these things because I'm going to lead up to some action items as I close out here. Now, with that experience, you may be sitting here and saying, wow, that is uncomfortable. I've never experienced anything like that. And some of you all may have this gut-wrenching feeling that there's no way that that's happening in our community because it's something that you may not have experienced. And those feelings are okay. I don't expect you to understand. What I'm going to encourage you to do is to be empathetic and also not suppress my lived experiences. And so, as I set out on my journey for diversity and inclusion, I first had to learn more about myself because much of what I had become was a product of my lived experiences. I knew that some of my behavior prompted certain reactions, and so I tried to suppress that. I wanted to feel welcomed. I wanted to feel a part. And so I minimized much of what I knew growing up in Detroit, Michigan, and that wasn't who I was. And so I lost my own identity in trying to fit into a community that maybe didn't accept me for who I was. And so I really learned who I was and also learned much of my history. I started to value the differences in others, and not just their ethnicity, but the difference in opinions, because I think there's so much value in that. We don't have to agree. That's okay. We can differ. You can still be an idiot, and I can be the smartest person in the world. That's okay. Difference in perspectives, orientation, gender, religious study, or religious and political views. All those things are okay to differ. Now, I'm no expert, but I will offer a few subtle ways in which you can take action steps in your personal life or in your business to be more inclusive. I think one of the things is that self-assessment, which is tough because it is hard to look in the mirror and find the things that are good about yourself, especially in this digital world that we live in, and the things that are not so good or need improvement within yourself. But you can do that through examination, understanding who you are, and that includes your privileges. We all have privileges. I have privileges as a male, as a believer, as a Christian, as a straight male, and also identifying your implicit biases. And your implicit biases are a combination of thoughts that are impacted by your lived experiences. So if you had an interaction with a certain group of people that was negative, from there on out, that may impact your view of that group of people or people that look like them. So really taking a step back and understanding who you are and where your mental state is. Actively listening, I think, is a lost art in our culture and our communities, and especially in an online format, right? We are very quick to impose our thoughts and our beliefs on other people. And if you don't agree, wow, you got some things to figure out, right? So a great way to really start active listening is just repeating what you heard from someone, just to make sure you're interpreting it the right way, or the way that they intend to get it across. And I think that's where much of our failures are when we look at comprehension. it's very easy to interpret communication. Being authentic and being your true self, I think, is incredibly important. Acknowledging your shortfalls and blind spots if you are aware of them. But if you aren't, and if you have a hard time acknowledging that, there are assessments that you can take or that you can bring into your business where you can start to visualize and understand where you may have blind spots. If you want a more diverse customer base, think about how your business represents the customer base that you want to attract. Do they see themselves in your marketing? Be intentional. Be clear about your goals and specific in the ways to achieve them. For example, build your business for the future. Many of you may know that as we look out at the demographics, they are changing, and they are changing fast. And so if you are to continue to thrive as a business, you might want to make sure that your business welcomes BIPOC folks. And when I say BIPOC, I mean Black, Indigenous, people of color, because that group is going to be growing incredibly fast from here on out. And soon, more people will look like me. What does your marketing do? Does your promotional materials invite people? Are they in Spanish or Hmong? Seeing as though we have growing populations here in Portage County. What does your recruitment look like? Are you intentional with your recruitment? Do you go to areas where you're more likely to interact with BIPOC candidates? Or do you just post your positions online? What does your training look like? Does your team undergo ongoing diversity and inclusion training? More often than not, we will identify with those definitions of diversity and inclusion that make us comfortable, make us feel comfortable. So it is so important as we look at these changing demographics that we understand how best to work with people that may not be like us. And the final thing that I'll share with you is accountability, which is incredibly important and is probably the hardest thing on this list. Accountability, you are responsible for what you do and how you articulate your feelings, okay? I'm also going to extend that a little bit further, and that accountability within your circles of influence and the places in which you're comfortable. And so challenging respectfully those ideologies that may exclude people or that may be based in hate or bigotry. And pose questions, not telling people that they're wrong, but pose questions to better understand their perspective and how they've arrived at that ideology. I say these things understanding that they are far more easier said than done. But those important things seldomly are. If you are to continue to thrive, these are things that you might want to do or even consider. So, soon enough, I will go back to UWSP and continue the work, which I think Jenny articulated. We're starting to see some results because we are intentional. We first approach our work with meeting the people where they are instead of protecting our needs and what makes us tick at the university. And I think with that approach, we can take care of each other and continue to grow and thrive. So, as I leave you here today or yield to answer any questions, I invite you to review and assess your plan. Have a plan to begin with. Review and assess it often. Create a timeline for that implementation. Oftentimes we make plans and then we sit them on the shelf and nothing ever happens. Measure your goals and your outcomes. As much as I have shied away from math in my early career, I've come to learn that measuring outcomes can help you make decisions about where you are to go in the future. So this is how UWSP has done it. I'm not saying that that's the business model for everybody, but what I do know is that with a healthy UWSP, we will contribute to the success of this county and this city. And so we're going to continue to do that. And we're doing that through intentional relationships. And I think that's what we may have gotten away from in our society. And so with that, I will yield there, and I want to thank you for your time and your ears. If you don't take anything away from today other than this, I will ask you to just take one thing and apply that to your everyday life. You may not change the entire world, but what you can do is start to change the world around you. So thank you so much for your time and your ears, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Awesome.
And we're not going to let Mark go anywhere because we want to hear some questions from you folks. If there's some questions, Kayla, from the folks on online. I heard one thing I heard yesterday. I was on the SHRM Group's Society of Human Resource Managers had speakers talking about diversity plans. And one of the speakers said there's over 100 sites to publicize job openings that connect with diverse and inclusive groups in the world. So sometimes people say, oh, I don't know where to post anything where I would attract diverse candidates. So there's plenty of them out there. So that seems to come across as an excuse. Mark, what's your email address, just in case people want to touch base with you and reach out to you? I think it's, well, go ahead, you tell.
Yeah, my email address is myoung@uwsp.edu. And I do have some business cards in the car.
That's the safest place to keep them. myoung@uwsp.edu. Craig, go ahead. If you wouldn't mind repeating the question, Mark, just so people online can hear. Go ahead, Craig.
What's your percentage of students of color at UWSP right now?
Yeah, so we are growing in that regard and growing faster than many other campuses, even those campuses in urban areas. So we're at about 18 total percent last time I checked. And our incoming freshman class will see a spike in our diversity because of the efforts that we've made. Oh, sorry, forgot to recite the question. Oh, we're good. Okay. And that spike that we're seeing is because, again, that intentionality. So instead of sitting back and hoping that students actually come to us, we go to students, understanding that some of the students in Milwaukee and Madison may not have the means to get to UW-Stevens Point if their parents are working odd hours. And so we actually have launched what we call pointer pop-ups, where we're going to be popping up around the state and even jump over into Minnesota and Illinois and try and reach demographics that we normally would.
Do you have a percentage of staff of color?
At the university?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of. It's too small, I can tell you that.
Our school.
Yeah.
And as you're recruiting students, try to bring more Packer fans into Central Wisconsin.
Well, I don't think there's a shortage of Packer fans here.
You can never have too many. Other questions? Other questions? Dirk?
What are some of the obstacles that you're seeing when you're going out recruiting? Is it just the awareness of Stevens Point, or is there other factors that are playing?
What are some of the obstacles with recruiting students to UW-Stevens Point? I think I alluded to it a little bit earlier. One, we haven't told our story well enough. We have a beautiful campus located in a beautiful city. I mean, right now is the most scenic time in Central Wisconsin. And so we didn't do a very good job, in my opinion, of telling our story. We weren't intentional about it. For a long time, there were more students available than there were seats at colleges and universities. And so now that the pendulum has swung, there are more seats than there are students. We have to be more aggressive and operate as a private school more so than we are a regional public. We also took a personalized approach to our recruitment. And so we stopped relying on mass communication to create relationships. We looked at what our competitors are doing, and with folks sitting in the audience here today, I'm going to give away a little secret, so get your pens ready. We are in communication plans for every one of our direct competitors. And so we know what they're saying. We know what they're communicating to students. What we are doing is looking at that and doing it differently. And so we understand that people are not doing handwritten letters. And so after every visit, we write a handwritten note from the ambassador to that student, acknowledging something that we learned on the campus tour about their experience. We build trust through authenticity with our personalized communication. And people are more likely to buy something from you or invest in your product if they believe in you, if they trust you in that relationship. And so every admission letter, all 5,000 plus last year, I hand signed and wrote a note at the bottom. It's a great day to be a Pointer. Welcome to the Pointer family. And so we're looking at our competition and we're doing things that they aren't. And when you put in that extra work to create the relationship and people trust you, they will buy whatever you're selling, good or bad. because they trust that you won't sell them anything bad.
And we had another question, Mike?
Has your perception of our community changed since that first year? And if so, how?
Yeah. Question was, has my perception of Stevens Point or Portage County changed since that first year? And I would say yes. That's the short answer. The long answer is yes, but. As we watch our nation go through what I will almost classify as a civil war on social media, online, you know, you turn an eye to things, or you really focus in on those instances that you may have overlooked when things were a little bit more comfortable. I am seeing some of my either colleagues or folks that I call acquaintances or friends voice their very strong opinions, and they have the right to do so, but recognizing that they differ than mine, and for many reasons. But what I do know is that there has been growth and there has been strides made. Similar to the university, despite all that good work, we have a ton of work to do. And so, yes, my perspective has changed since that first year. I think the difference in my perspective is I'm not just going to sit back and complain about it. I'm going to actually get involved and put in the work to help bring about that change.
Sue?
Do you have in any of your plans to start resource groups? So once you get the students here and they're attending, are you looking that they have resource groups? Because I think as businesses would be interested in also connecting with the university, we started some resource groups there.
Yeah, great question. And the question was specific to resource groups, because I'm well aware of that potential revolving door. Getting students here and they maybe not being comfortable and then exiting, or getting here, graduating, and then exiting our community. I want to slow down that revolving door. Actually, I'd love to stop it. Let's just have an entryway, no exit opportunities. And so that would be more outside of the scope of my work, but I am involved in some of those discussions. We actually have been in conversations with Target lately about how to diversify their store and make it more inclusive, and then looking at potential opportunities for employment, internships, and even assessments of their facility and their team, and training opportunities with Target and coupling that with the university. So it was just a very early conversation that we had. The store manager, Kevin, reached out to me because of a Zoom call that was forwarded to him from someone who attended. And we just had a quick conversation. A lot of ideas spiraled from that. But yeah, I think there are opportunities to better engage the university and the community.
My daughter-in-law is Black from the north side of Chicago. She met my son at UW Claire. And I know one of the challenges she had being in a very non-diverse campus was fitting in and feeling welcome. And when it's such a minority, you're noticed everywhere you go because there's virtually no other Black students there. It's a very small population. So what things are you doing around intentionality to help different people feel comfortable on campus and involved and welcome?
Great question. In short, what are you doing to make sure that BIPOC students attending UWSP feel welcome and included? So that's a great question. That's one that I struggle with, and actually why I got involved. An example that I love to talk about is we recruited, at 1 year, we recruited 50 students from Washington, D.C. And we were not prepared for that magnitude of students to come from one area. Heck, there are cities in Wisconsin where we don't even get 50 students. And so we quickly had to identify opportunities because for many of the students, there were barriers that could impact their immediate welcoming to UW Stevens Point, like transportation. We recognized that many of the students were trying to figure out logistics to get to Stevens Point. And so instead of just saying, hey, catch a flight to Milwaukee, then you can catch a bus to Stevens Point, we actually chartered 2 coach buses out to Washington, D.C., When we pull up to Washington, D.C., there are 1,000 people standing there waiting to greet us because they're doing a send-off for their most prized possessions. And like, right? Why didn't we think about this much sooner? So we created those relationships with the families. We got the students there, and we started to see some of that isolation. They only would hang out with one another, even in the classroom setting. You know, they were asked, you know, so slavery. And they would turn to the one Black student in the class to speak for the entire Black community. And that is incredibly uncomfortable, okay? It is not the burden of any one person to speak about an entire culture. And so a few things that we did to make students feel more welcome and bring a piece of DC to Stephen's point, we did something so small, but it was huge. There's a sauce that student, Mambo sauce, and they put it on everything except cereal in Washington, D.C. And so we got a recipe, and it was almost like getting the keys to the kingdom in D.C. because nobody would give it to us. We got that recipe, and then we brought it to our dining facility. It made the world of difference for the students because they saw a piece of them in that space. For our dining facility, they also began to bring different cultures into our dining facility. From an academic perspective, we launched the Center for Inclusive Teaching and Learning. So it helped our professors see beyond their lens and their scope in which they were comfortable with teaching, maybe through a Eurocentric point of view that they had been conditioned over their 20 years of education. And finally, we built out diversity in college access. We added more resources. So we included a Native American coordinator position, and we built that out. And so there's a safe space for students to go and be themselves. There is the Multicultural Resource Center that welcomes all students, but is specifically a space for students that are underrepresented minorities. And then we started to uncover different shortcomings by looking at our data. And so when we looked at FAFSA filers, white compared to minority, we saw a gap. And so we're doing more intentional outreach there to help students complete that FAFSA and make sense of that federal jargon that they get in an award letter. So quite a few things that we're doing, but still a lot of work yet to be done.
Are you able to stick around for a minute or two afterwards in case people have some questions?
Yeah.
Okay, because we're gonna have to end the meeting. I was gonna say Central Wisconsin's a better place for having Marc here, but I think, I don't want to be too, but I think the world's a better place. Marc, you did a great job this morning. We asked Marc to come and share us, we all know of the challenges. We don't know the challenges maybe personally, we know of the challenges. And oftentimes we hear a lot about those challenges, and we don't hear about what can we do to make an impact on those. And we can each do our own little piece. Marc shared several of those. So Marc, I appreciate that. The world is a better place. So help me thank Marc one more time.